Welcome to the Three Voices podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Blue, and we are here to talk about our experiences that might be labeled as psychotic, including voices, mania, paranoia, and unusual beliefs. Some of us have been hospitalized and been given diagnosis. Some of us have not. We are free to use any language we want to explain our experiences and extreme states, including salty or triggering language, and some people will describe their experiences as positive, spiritual, or supernatural. We're here to share and listen and learn, so it's okay if you hear things you agree with or disagree with. It's okay if you like your meds, don't like your meds, or aren't taking any meds. It's okay if you like your doctor or hate your doctor. We respect the diversity of views. Please do not believe or disbelieve anything that we talk about here. Just be open-minded and do your own research. With the occasional exception, we are not professionals, doctors, or therapists. We are not giving advice. We are simply peers who are telling our personal stories and sharing our own experiences from our perspectives. It is our hope to share what we have gleaned from our experiences and from our gathered knowledge, the same knowledge that you yourself can find through sources such as the internet, books, and other media. We will always put links in the description below so that you yourself can do your own research. If at any time you believe that you have anything that needs to be treated or diagnosed, we recommend that you see a professional and seek out help. And welcome back again. This time around, we are going to be discussing mindfulness and hearing quite a bit of amazing life stories and events from John Shearer, the Australian Mindfulness Master. I had an amazing and beautiful long conversation, and I've decided this time, instead of cutting it into pieces, we're just going to allow the whole thing to run through. And you get to have all of it in one place. That way you don't miss any of the beauty. There was no way I was going to be able to cut this into little pieces. I hope that you enjoy the opportunity to hear John's story of how he went through what he calls his darker years and how he has now come to be a mindfulness master. And so I'll allow him to introduce himself in more full detail.
Yeah, thank you. I'm John Shearer. I'm a mindfulness master in Australia.
Exactly what does mindfulness master mean?
Mindfulness master is the result of 9,000 hours of study into all aspects of mindfulness. So that's why I call myself a mindfulness master these days. One time I would say that I was a jack of all trades and master of none. But today, I'm a master of mindfulness. I know who I am, which is a pretty important thing to know.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that that's amazing. That's more dedication than I would say I'd put into anything. If you wouldn't mind sharing, how did you get to this point in your life?
Well, I have a bit of a story, and it starts in 1982 when I died in a truck smash. My dog died. He really did die. Obviously, I was revived. But what followed was I had a lot of physical injuries. I was pretty smashed up. But that paled away almost to insignificance because of the 15 years of mental suffering. I was diagnosed later that year after I experienced what the system calls psychosis. I was diagnosed with mental illness, and so began a 15-year journey, which I now call my dark years. In 1997, an old friend of mine knocked on my door and told me his story. And it was that story that led to my awakening 2 days later. It was amazing.
You had a death experience, followed by what has been labeled psychosis, and then spiritual awakening?
Pretty much sums it up. There's a lot more to the story of my 15 dark years, of course. Years that I'm really thankful for now, because I learned many lessons. I had my ups, I had my downs. They were pretty severe, and I'm really thankful for it all now. I really am, because it's helped make me who I am today.
That's beautiful. Would you be willing to share what your awakening moment was? I'm kind of curious about the whole thing. Would you be willing to elaborate on any of it?
Sure. Yeah, it was later in 1982, and I was actually sitting cross-legged on my lounge room floor with my first wife, and at that time VHS recorders were just new out, and it had a counter, and it was turning over. And I said to my wife, "Don't you see that?" And she said, "See what?" All she could see was a counting turner over. Those numbers, they all have meanings. Well, of course, she thought I'd lost it. And, well, quite frankly, so did I in the end. They convinced me that I had. And I ended up in I'm not allowed to call it a psych ward anymore. That's not proper. We'll call it a mental health unit. So that's where I ended up. And I was medicated. And, of course, I was saying there's nothing wrong with me the whole time. So there began my journey. And they brought me down. I was in a high place, admittedly, absolutely. But what followed was a long depression. And this happened again in 1984. It was a different vision. I would call them visions now. And actually, there's another term, and you can Google this because it's growing worldwide, and that's spiritual emergency. So I had spiritual emergencies. I now know they were spiritual emergencies. I didn't know at the time, of course. In 1982, 1984, 1987, 1992, and again in 1997. And I'll tell you a little story about 1997. And I was at Sydney Railway Station waiting for a train back to Wagga Wagga, which was you would call it 500 miles, I guess, away, and a big long platform. I was waiting, so I decided to go for a stroll down the platform. And about halfway down, I realised, because I'm always been a man big on eye contact, I realised that all the men were making eye contact or giving me a nod or some gesture or whatever, connecting with. And when I got down to the end of the platform, well, okay, I decided I'd walk back up the other side of the platform. This time, it was all the women, all the way up, just women catching my eye. By the time I got back up to the top of the platform, I said, "Oh, no, here we go again. That is just too amazing what just happened." But this time, I said to myself, if that's you, God, you can come to me this time. I'm not chasing after this. I'm not even going there. It didn't happen. So I just put it out of my mind. And that was a Monday. The following Friday, which just happened to be World Mental Health Day, 10th of October, 10/10, one of my favourite dates actually. And that's when I got the knock on the door. And it was an old friend who I hadn't seen for 20 years before my accident. He left Wagga Wagga and went to the city to be a professional punter. And he did very well because he went and met trainers and owners of trotters specifically. And he did really well and built himself a big house, got married, started a family, but then gambling got him and down he went. Then he reverted to drugs, smoking dope. We used to smoke a bit of dope together actually. And he hit rock bottom. And then he found religion actually. And that's what he wanted to share with me, his story, his testimony. And he did. And he suggested that I go over to a house in another suburb of Wagga Wagga to a house church meeting. Sure, I'll go. Why not? I'm on the road to nowhere. Because at that time, mental health professionals told me that what I had was incurable, that I'd have to take medication for the rest of my life, and that I would never work again. And I believed them because they're the professionals. What would I know? So I was well and truly stuck. But sure, I'll go over there. And you know, I've never seen Stuart, that was his name, Stuart Carpenter. I've never seen him to this day. It was like he was a ghost. He just disappeared. He kept going. Anyhow, on the Sunday I went over there, 12th of October, some dates you don't forget. And when I got there, I found that there was a little church kind of service. And there was a guy who travelled some 100 miles away from another town. And he brought a couple of musicians with him. And they were trying to get what turned out to be a cult, actually, trying to get that going in town. And after the service, which was, we sang a couple of songs and did a bit of worship, whatever, he said, "Do you want to be baptised?" I said, "Sure, I'll be baptised. I'm on the road to nowhere. Why not?" Well, it turned out he had a portable baptismal tank in the boot of his car. So he brought it in, and it was pretty big, and I'm glad that it was springtime, not too cold, and filled it up, and then I was baptized. And when I come up out of the water, I was praying in tongues, which I'd never even heard of before that day. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And to this day, it's the way I pray still, because tongues comes from the heart. There's no mind in it. You see it in a lot of different cultures, like North American Indians with their war dance, and Maoris with their haka. Then you got Hare Krishnas, and they do chanting and things. It's all a similar thing in different cultures, and it's all from the heart. Anyhow, that's how I had my awakening, and there followed a 4-year pretty intensive Bible study, which I now call my apprenticeship into spirituality. Of course, it wasn't long after that, and God, the universe, showed me the big picture, which was that God, or the universe, is way bigger than any religion. Yeah, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of my story of awakening.
That's amazing and beautiful, and I feel like I can relate to pieces of it, and it's still so incredibly beautifully unique. I prayed in tongues when I was younger in an evangelical church, and I find that that is beautiful and meaningful, and I have a lot of respect for that. That's beautiful. And so from there, how did that go to you starting to research or study mindfulness?
Soon after my accident, I had this almost I'm not sure what you would call it, but a belief, I guess, that there must be a reason why I was alive. Because if you saw the photos of the truck wreck, you wouldn't give me a chance, not a chance of being alive. So I had this compelling belief in me, I guess, that there must be a reason why I'm alive. There has to be. So I started a quest then in 1982, and I started to study religions, cultures, history, because I wanted answers. So that's when it started in 1982, my quest for knowledge, and it hasn't stopped. It won't stop until I die, actually, because I love learning, and you can never stop learning either. Even with me today being a teacher, but I'm also the student as well, with all the people who I teach how to be mindfulness mentors. But I'm still always the student as well. But going back to 1982 and my quest, I went back to smoking dope myself, smoking marijuana, which didn't help. But then again, I really believe today that anybody who smokes marijuana, they kind of open a door somewhere, and everybody I talk to agrees that because everybody has some sort of spiritual experience with that. And when you really look at ancient shamans and medicine people, or whatever you call them, the spiritual go-to person in tribes, that was often done as well. All sorts of psychedelic type things were used to help people open up to whatever it is. Yeah, it's quite amazing.
I've researched lots of that. Shaman is on my business card. I don't use substances simply because it lowers my coping mechanisms, and I already have a dissolving of the ego when that happens. I've been diagnosed with schizoaffective bipolar type and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of these things that when I was younger, I didn't understand things and I didn't have coping skills. They ruled my life. And when I used substances like marijuana, it dissolved my ego. It made it so that there was no line between me and the universe. I was completely susceptible to every emotion around me, every atom I could feel. And so I believe that, yeah, with the right proper uses, they can be wonderful, beautiful tools, but they can also be easily abused, and any tool can be abused. A butter knife can be abused.
Absolutely. Well, today I don't even drink coffee because it's an addictive substance. I don't touch alcohol. I don't touch anything. I'm pretty much just healthy eating, clear mind, awesome. So I'm not, if anyone's listening, don't go starting to smoke drugs because I said that. Yeah, you know where I'm going, and you're right. because it can open up the dark side as well as the light. That's the truth. Very important to realise that. I don't want to sort of mislead anyone.
I agree with you, yeah.
So you asked how I started my mindful practice. Well, in 1997, when I had my spiritual awakening, there ended my depression and I was able to go off meds, which is like 22 years ago now. And life was beautiful. It wasn't too long and I found my purpose. I also made my childhood dreams come true because I was following. I really felt that I was following because I would pray and silence my mind and listen. And I built a relationship with my source energy. And that's what I like to call it. Matter of fact, every morning now, and have done for many years, I walk my dogs. I usually leave home in the dark, take them for a walk down to the local golf club and connect with nature and witness the sunrise. I never fail to put my arms up and say, what are we doing today, soul? S-O-L in capitals. S-O-L is an ancient Greek word for the sun, because I kind of like the idea of my source energy being the sun. What better thing? And when you really consider that at our core we are energy, and once we realize that we have a connection with that creative, divine, whatever it is out there, it's powerful. And when you develop that connection, life becomes grand. You see all the magic. You see the light in everyone and everywhere. And you're amazed at little things. And it's really beautiful.
That's beautiful. I too believe in the energy. I've always said the energy is the one thing that never ceases to exist. So I'm with you on that.
So I continued my journey, of course. And yeah, like I said, no more depression. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have unhelpful and negative thoughts. I did. But I could handle them easy. And by just simply saying, that's from the dark side, that one, I'll let it go through to the keeper, kind of thing. But in 2009, I'll fast forward a little bit now, 2009, I lost a friend to an asthma attack. And he was a really good friend. He was the same age as me at the time, 55. And my wife was using the same breathing apparatus, especially in winter, to start her day because she was chronic asthma. She was an asthma sufferer. So we made the decision to move north into a warmer climate. And I thought, well, what would I do? So what I did do in January 2009, I surfed the internet for the latest things in mental health. I surfed and surfed and surfed. And eventually I came across a book called The Happiness Trap. It's written by an Australian doctor, Dr. Russ Harris. It's a world bestseller. And The Happiness Trap is about ACT, which means acceptance and commitment therapy, which is probably the latest and simplest of all therapies. And it's very much a mindfulness-based therapy. So I read the book and I fell in love with mindfulness, the whole idea of mindfulness. Wow, it really spoke to me. So that's when I started an intensive study into mindfulness right there. Also, I went along and got Dr. Russ Harris to train me as an ACT therapist. Then we moved north and I finished up getting a job with juvenile justice as a mentor, which is, well, juvenile jail, really. And they wanted me full-time. I said no. I was determined I was going to be a mindfulness coach because through my dark years, I was trained as a counsellor because I did have times when I was well. And because I felt there was a reason why I was alive, I was driven to do different counselling courses. But I didn't like the idea of calling myself a counsellor because just the term even sort of suggests that there's something wrong with you if you go to a counsellor. That's just me. But people are just stuck like I was. They're stuck. And when they get unstuck, they get well. So I thought, no, I'm going to call myself a coach. So that's when I came up with my business name, Mindfulness Coach. And about 4 years ago, I kind of changed my Facebook page to Mindfulness Mentor when I started mindfullymad.org, which is a place where you can find a mindfulness mentor, and they're all around the world now. It's also a place where you can share your story, because there's so much power in sharing our stories, and we all have one. And if people can get over their fears and start sharing their stories, the world will be a much better place, because it inspires people, and people start to think, well, I'm not the only one. Yeah, so it gives you a little bit of insight into where I went. But why I was starting to say that story was I was still having unhelpful and negative thoughts. And when they drop in your mind, and I really believe everyone does, because that's how we've been conditioned from the days of a caveman, even. Because the caveman, if you can imagine the caveman, he would go out the front of his cave and have a stretch, and all he really had to do was go hunting. But he had to be highly aware, because if he didn't notice that shadow or that rustling of the leaves, he might have got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So he really had to be not only highly aware, but he also had to be thinking, what could go wrong? What if that? And we're still like that today. We still have those, I call them fears, but there's no saber-toothed tigers really, but we still think like that. I think you see where I'm going, Jamie.
I do. And it's refreshing to hear somebody else who has such similar thoughts. We have the same survival techniques, even though we don't have to live in the same world, but our mind holds on to that kept us alive before. Even though we can change our environment, we still have to teach our mind that it's okay to let go of those techniques that kept us alive, which is hard to do if they have kept us alive in the past. So one of the diagnoses I was given was borderline personality disorder. Now, it's only ever come up when I was in very abusive, toxic relationships. So the symptoms that fall in that category make sense when you're being heavily abused by a spouse. And so for me, that part of me, when I'm experiencing it, is more like having a werewolf on your shoulder that's trying to protect you. And there's been more years where that part of myself has been necessary than there have been years where it wasn't. And just because it's not necessary now doesn't mean that it isn't going to be constantly on the lookout for people who are dangerous. But I have to always be mindful to make sure that I am aware that those thoughts are tied to these situations, not the current situation.
That's awesome. Good on you, Jamie. Yeah, well, that's how it was. And up until, 2009, when I started my own mindful practice, it didn't really take too long. And those unhelpful and negative thoughts started taking a back seat, because I knew there was a better way of dealing with them. And that was by not doing anything with them, because thoughts are just that, thoughts. There's really no need to dwell on them. There's no need to certainly not ruminate on things. There's no need to fight with them or act on them or try and avoid them with drugs or alcohol or even pharmaceuticals for that matter. So thoughts are just that, thoughts. And I come up with the idea of the silent observer, and I do a little, what I call a relaxing mindfulness exercise every one-on-one consultation I do, and also when I talk to groups and even larger meeting places or universities, in lecture theatres or wherever. Wherever I talk, I like to do a little 15-minute silent observer, I call it. You can also call it a guided meditation, but I try not to use the word meditation too much, because a lot of people out there really think mindfulness is meditation, but it's not. So I'd like to just mention that straight away, because when we meditate, we are practicing mindfulness, there's no doubt. But we don't have to make time to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that you live, and we practice it all day long. Everything we do, we eventually, with practice, and I should stress that, because it doesn't happen overnight, and it's not a quick fix or a cure. It doesn't cure anything, but it certainly gives you the tools to be able to handle whatever comes along, especially those unhelpful and difficult thoughts, because mindfulness really is all about awareness. You can almost call mindfulness awareness. And when we look at the true meaning of the word mindful, it's mind, and there's a difference between mind and brain. The brain has a function and the mind has a function. So they're kind of different as well. And the full, the original meaning of full, was presence. So it's mind presence. So we could call mindfulness awareness, quite simply. And it's all about noticing. When we notice that unhelpful thought or the negative thought or our minds in the past, which can make us depressed, or our minds in the future, which can make us anxious, or just our minds 1,000 miles away, somewhere else, then, and this is, I can simplify 9,000 hours of study into all aspects of mindfulness this way, and you'll see it all over my social media stuff. Be mindful, pause, connect. That's it. It's as simple as that. Be mindful is the key thought we use to trigger a pause. Anytime we notice that unhelpful or negativity or whatever, or there's a lot going on, we can just say to ourselves, and it's like our heart giving our mind the instruction, be mindful. And that triggers a pause. And it only takes a few seconds. So we pause, and in that pause, we connect. We connect with where we are using our 5 senses. We connect with who we're with full presence. So that means when I'm talking like now and you're listening, Jamie, you're fully present with me. And when you talk, I'm fully present with you, and we have a connection. And also, and this is the most important part, and it's the missing thing in mental health today, the elephant in the room, I call it, and that is we connect with our source energy, whatever you believe that to be. Connect. It's the power of the pause, I often say. The power of mindfulness is in the silence between our thoughts. So the more silence we can create throughout our day, the more power to us. And it only takes a few seconds. And there really is power in that pause. Simply because when we connect with where we are, firstly, and it doesn't matter what's going on, someone can be angry at you or in your face, or you might be under pressure at work, or anything. A million different things will be going on. But we can connect with it, with our senses. And also we can connect with whoever we're with, of course. And when we connect with our source energy, well, that actually, those few seconds pause, it actually turns on our intuition, our creativity, and also the next step. Because you might have 500 things to do, but if you can just pause and connect, then that next step or the highest priority thing will drop into your mind. So before you know it, you're living life without a plan because you don't really need one. And it's just amazing. Yeah.
I like that. One of the things that I've had to learn in the last year is that as an American, especially, it's pushed that you're supposed to multitask, which it's not actually possible to multitask. Your brain is only capable of really doing one thing at a time. But we attempt all the time to do so many things, to be having a conversation while texting somebody or trying to get the most out of everything you do. And because of that, we're not giving anything our full attention. And we never put the phone down. And last year, I watched a TED Talk about the value of boredom and how until you're bored, you lose out on unlocking part of the mind that allows you to be truly creative, because you need to learn to be content with the silence that you have, because it's then that you start to actually pay attention to yourself. And I feel like that is when I personally started to understand mindfulness in my world, because I had to allow my mind to pay attention to what was going on with myself and around me in order to not pick up my phone or not pick up a piece of paper and a pen or not do those habits that I've been trained to do for the last 30 plus years.
That's excellent, Jamie. Really excellent. And well, you sound pretty young. I don't know how old you are.
I'm almost 35.
That's young. I'm 66. But I really don't believe that you need to be old to be wise. And you're carrying a lot of wisdom around already. Lucky you, because good on you. I think our life experience is where we get wisdom. And I often ask people this question: is it necessary to go through the dark to be able to walk in the light? Most people agree that yes, because, don't know, but it's an interesting topic.
It's part of the yin and yang, isn't it? I mean, in order to appreciate one, you have to have experienced the other. There's always a little dark with the light and a little light with the dark.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of opposite polarities. They talk about bipolar because I was diagnosed manic depressive way back, which is now called bipolar. And I'm really happy that finally they started calling manic depressive illness bipolar disorder, because really my view now is that the whole idea of mental illness is a bit of a myth. I really don't believe there is any illness, and I haven't been able to find any proof that that's actually true. But disorder, wow, the psychiatric model or the DSM, I think they're up to version 6 now, they can diagnose anyone with a disorder, no trouble at all. So perhaps we've all got a disorder. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, the whole idea of psychiatry. And last year I was appointed to a forum. It's called the Northern Rivers Mental Health Professional Network Forum, and it's a 2-year appointment. And the forum was set up by the government to look at making recommendations to improvements in mental health services. And when I went for the interview, because there was an interview process to be part of the forum, well, firstly, I asked them, was this just another talk fest? Because a lot of things are all talk, no action. But they gave me a very good answer and told me about some things that have been introduced to make services better. So that was good. Then they asked me what I was going to bring to the forum. I said, I've got a simple, and that is, I want to see the psychiatric model go from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Because every single person who comes to me for some mentoring or coaching has trauma without exception. So it's not a simple shift, but it's huge.
Today I was in a different chat like this one. It's a group of people who get together because they want to learn things, and someone there was going through some sort of mental health stress, but they didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody about it. And so I'd been in the chat for just a few minutes, and I have zero ability to even care about hiding my stuff at all. I don't have the time to really waste in trying to develop a friendship with somebody if they're going to freak out if they find out that I have voices and visions. Might as well just know now and decide that you don't want to be friends with me now. So I said in the thing, so I don't know if it helps, but I am a peer support specialist. I'm trained 4 ways from Sunday, and I facilitate trauma and healing, voices and visions, and peer support groups. I'm here if you want to talk. You don't have to. But I've never met a person who doesn't have some sort of trauma, so don't feel like you're going to ever scare me away. And Before that point, there had only been 2 people talking. And after that point, 15 people were talking. Because I feel like it was permission to say, hi, I am a human being who has been hurt and I'm allowed to talk. And that, for some reason, is something that people don't get to hear very often, and they need to. I've never met a human being who hasn't been hurt. But at the same time, I've met a lot of human beings who have tried very hard to act as if they haven't been hurt. And that just hurts them more.
That's excellent, Jamie. Well done. And I'm exactly the same. I don't. Well, one of my favourite sayings is, true faith is the absence of fear. When you take your mask off, and wouldn't it be a wonderful world if no one was wearing masks? Yeah, it sets you free. I remember when I started telling my story, because there was a time when my mental health history was my dark secret. I wouldn't share that with anybody. But when I finally did, which is years ago now, it set me free. It absolutely set me free. It was quite amazing. And I would encourage everybody to start telling their stories and start talking. And you're quite right. That went from no one talking in the group to all 15 talking. And that's just awesome. Here in Australia, my wife and I, we conduct a monthly yarning circle at the local mental health unit at the hospital. And it's always interesting, and sometimes we have that many people sitting in a circle. And a yarning circle, in case you don't know what it is, we sit in a circle and we have a talking stick. It's in other cultures too. We have a talking stick and we go around the circle, and everybody just says their name and what's on their mind. And usually we have a topic for the day. So we just pick a word and that becomes the topic. It's always about mindfulness too, of course. And it's really, really powerful when you do that. And when you go back 1,000 years, the yarning circle was used to make decisions. And typically, or in the Aboriginal culture, go around, if there was an issue in the tribe, they would call a yarning circle and they go around the circle. And if everyone agreed, it was passed. But if everybody wasn't in agreement, it would go around again and again and again until everybody agreed. Then it was passed. Boom, done. Wouldn't it be good if politics was a bit like that? But I'm not going to start talking about politics.
I would love it if the system worked like that. I would love it so much. I'm on a couple of boards, executive boards and advocacy boards and committees, and we get to do a check-in as we go around. Everybody gives their name, their position, and we have a hat topic, but it's kind of like a super teeny tiny glimpse of that. And then we go around and we talk about whatever the business of the day is, and we hope to get something done.
We can never lose hope, that's for sure. There was a time when hope was the only thing that kept me alive, and that was a time when I was very suicidal. And there's a bit of a story about that too. It was the time in 1987 when I ended up in a mental health unit. And I woke up early in the morning. I'll tell you this little story. I woke up early in the morning and I was scared. And I thought I must have just had a nightmare, or there was no recall, but I was scared. So I went out in the backyard and had a pee on the lemon tree, which I often did because I like to watch the stars or whatever. And then this fear came over me. I never experienced anything like it before. So I went out the front. Then I started to run. And this was in May. And May is the start of winter here in Australia, because we're opposite to you, of course. And I started to run. And I ran probably 5 kilometres barefoot. And I was only in shorts and singlet. And it was really cold, but I didn't feel the cold. I didn't even feel my feet. But I ran and I was scared because there was a presence that was behind me. And I'll never forget it. And I ended up on the banks of the Murrumbidgee River, which was one of my favourite places, actually. That's where I ended up. And then a arm came over me when I got there, but it was only momentarily. And then a voice came into my mind, and it was kind of like a voice, but I prefer to call it an epiphany. and it said, "Kill yourself or your youngest will die," like that. And I remember my reaction to it. I yelled at the top of my voice, "F off!" And I can still remember the echo down the river. You know, when you yell out and you get an echo, and it echoed down the river. It was quite amazing. And anyhow, I ended up in a mental health unit that day as well. It was really, really powerful, and it was dark. And I actually picked out the limb of a gum tree that looked pretty good to throw a rope over. And I was planning to end it right then. Yeah. But the only thing that kept me alive was that tiny voice that said, and often said, "There's a reason. You'll get over this. There's a reason." A tiny little voice in the back of my head, which gave me hope. And honestly, without that, I'd be gone. I'd be gone.
That's amazing and powerful. So that little voice, are you a believer in prophecy?
Prophecy. Yes, I really believe, because I've had times when I was in a manic state when I've got glimpses of the future. So if that's what prophecy is, and it kind of is, well, yeah, I definitely believe it.
I feel like that little voice is sort of your little prophetic self-prophecy to keep you going. I believe that some of us are given that sparkle in order to help keep us going because of how dark it can get. And I really wish that everybody had that gift, but I'm very thankful that you had that little voice.
You know, in 1984, I went into a bank and asked for a loan for a business that I was opening in the main street. And I ended up in a mental health unit then as well, and there's a bit of a story about that. But it was almost 20 years later that I actually did that. 20 years later. Yeah. And it was totally unrealistic in 1984. It was ridiculous. But that's because I had a vision and I chased after it. And it was just totally ridiculous. I was not in a good place. But 20 years later, my childhood dreams come true, because when I was a teenager, I used to wag school and go to the local snooker hall. And the champion player, he was actually South Australian champion for 28 consecutive years, the guy who taught me to play snooker. I used to dream as a kid of having my own place like that, full of snooker tables, because there was no pool tables way back then, but there is today. Pool is huge, as you know, especially in America. Well, in 2004, my wife and I opened a business in the main street of Wagga Wagga and ran that for 6 years. And we had 16 pool tables and a jukebox and a lot of youth. And my mentoring or coaching skills came to the fore then, all my counselling skills, because as you can imagine, a lot of young people, they came to me as the coach. And of course, I counselled them, but they didn't know they were being counselled. And it was really effective. And I really believe that, I know in juvenile justice this is the case, kids or teenagers would open up to me, probably because of my background, but they would open up to me where they would not open up to a counsellor or someone who they viewed as having authority. And I really believe that is the case too at schools with school counsellors to a degree. Anyhow, it was very effective. Yeah. But from 1984, when I had that vision, and then 2004, actually doing it 20 years later, amazing. And that got me to Vegas, actually, in 2005. Yeah, I went to Vegas with the Australian pool team, shooting pool, and did really well. Yeah, anyhow, I won't start beating my chest.
Well, that's awesome. So you had the vision, you just got the timing wrong, which I find is often true. I've heard John Harold, he, during one of his talks, was going over all of the things that he had during his extreme experience and how now he has gotten his reward. He's got all of these friends. He's got all of these experiences that he may not be the Dalai Lama, but he is now this voices and visions guru that a lot of people seek out for knowledge. And he got his award, but it wasn't the award that he thought, because he didn't have the award even fathomable in his mind at the time that he had the vision. So he had the right stuff. He just didn't have the right words or the right time. And I really feel like that happens so often. And I myself have had some really, really intense things that I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting. I know it's going to happen. I see. I'm just waiting. The pieces are going to fall together. I just don't know when.
Perfect. Be patient. Yeah, I told you about my dark experience, which was very powerful when we talk about opposite polarities. And
Yes, please.
it's quite true with yin and yang, even like you said, there's a little bit of light even in the darkest person, and vice versa. There's always a little bit of dark in the lightest person as well. It's just how it is. And you only got to open a newspaper to see evidence of that. Take someone who goes into a school shooting people. Well, their mind has gone completely to the dark. Then you have other people like who you just mentioned who are almost walking in the light. And that's like me today as well. No doubt in my mind, I know who I am. Well, that dark time I shared with you in 1987, well, I had a light time or another epiphany. And I really only had two really, really powerful ones. And that was in 1998, a few months. I was into my Bible study at that time after my spiritual awakening in 1997. And I remember, and I was every morning at dawn, I'd get up to read some of the Bible because I wanted to read the whole Bible and study it at that time, which I did. And I was reading this one morning in particular, and I had another, what I would call an epiphany, which is a very powerful thought. It's not like hearing a voice, but kind of is, because thoughts can be voices anyhow, really. Anyhow, this one said, help the mentally ill. And I still remember to this day, and I looked up into the heavens and raised my arms up and I said, but Lord, because I used to say Lord back then, but Lord, I'm one of them. That just seems so ridiculous, that powerful thought, but it was to become my purpose. And at that time, I was a written off pensioner, not working, written off for good by the professionals. And that just seems so ridiculous. But my journey since then, which is over 20 years, now an example of where I've come, over 1 million people follow my two Facebook pages. 670,000 follow Mindfulness Mentor, and 357,000, I think it is, follow Spiritual Warrior. So there you go. I've touched over 1 million people, and I could have never ever dreamt that. And I've written a book, and it's just amazing.
That's really powerful. Wow. And now looking back, would you have ever fathomed that you would be here now?
No way. Absolutely no way. No. But I had faith and I was following. And that's what we all need to do. Slow down a little bit and start listening. Because we'll take Christians, for example, and I was one of them. Pray, 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 pray. But it's the pause and to listen. That's where the power is. And honestly, the next step comes. And I really believe we have a purpose when we're born, because most people just go along and have a pretty normal kind of life, a happy life. And it was true for my brothers and sister. They've all had what I would say a normal sort of life, no problems. But me, from a young age, I was a rebel. I was totally different. But perhaps somehow we're trained that way, because honestly, I see my whole life as being a battleground, training me to be what I am today. I'm just so grateful, so grateful.
That's really powerful. If I can share, I just spent 10 days with my mother. She had a total knee replacement. And during that time, we had the opportunity to reconnect and to bond. She's been sober now for 10 years. And her getting sober was because after she lost her fiance to a massive heart attack, she was spinning out of control. She would have died. And I had gone through a Christian program that was a sober recovery program where you give up everything and you study the Bible and you realign your life. And I told her she needed to do that. She needed something. She needed faith. She needed structure. She needed to sober up. And she said, I can't do it because I have a dog. And I told her, no, you don't. I have a dog. And I dropped her off at a homeless shelter on Mother's Day. And she hated me. And now she says it was the greatest gift she ever got because she spent 16 months there. And she's been 10 years sober now. And she has a relationship with the divine. And she knows that she wouldn't be alive. But during this 10 days, we discussed how she doesn't remember a lot of what happened when I was a kid because she wasn't sober. And she feels really guilty about that. And I had to make sure she understood that, yeah, no, it sucked. It sucked a lot. But I needed to have gone through some things so that I can be who I am now. Because it's through my experiences that I've gained my strengths. And because of my experiences, I can be strengths for other people so that they can find their own strength. And any prophet, any amazing person, any hero's journey you ever find, they start with tragedy. They don't start with a silver spoon. The prince that shows up at the end that you know nothing about is the one that has the silver spoon. The one who the story is about is the one who had tragedy at the beginning. And I'm okay with that. But it took a lot of convincing for her to forgive herself about that.
Yeah, forgiveness starts with ourselves every time. Yeah, it really needs to. Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. My wife has titanium knees now. She's had the double knee replacement as well. But she's in a really good place, just like me. I just love synchronicity. I've been living it for years. And when you set an intention, and well, I raised my kids to be champions, and my eldest son, well, my only son too, he's a golf pro today and a golf club manager. And especially with young golfers, because I'm a golfer, I always share the Tiger Woods story because we've all heard of Tiger Woods. And I remember when he was 18 years old and he first won the Masters, the youngest ever winner of the Masters. And I remember his talk. And he said that he believed he was God's gift to golf and what he was going to do with his millions. And he said, and he'd just been offered 40 million by Nike. He actually got double that. His first sponsorship was 80 million from Nike. He said what he was going to do with his millions was build golf courses for poor people. So what an intention, what a dream, a big dream. And I say that to young people still. Dream big, like I used to. I used to dream big, but my mother, no way was I going to play snooker. That was the place back then where you found the local bookmaker, and it was seen as a dark place. No way, and she wasn't having it. So we've got to, whatever dream your kids have, just let them go for it. Yeah. So when you set an intention or dream, which is nearly the same thing, and it's for other people, that's the important thing. Like Tiger Woods' dream, that was for other people, not for himself. Then somehow the universe starts moving the furniture for you, and you meet the right people, and coincidences happen, or what we call coincidences. I don't believe there are coincidences. And before you know it, you're living a life of synchronicity and things happen for you. So good on you. You and I have been on similar journeys, Jamie, and I really believe we are indeed kindred spirits.
I think so too. Whenever you sent me your story, I was completely wowed, and I'm very, very thankful to have you on.
It's been a real pleasure, Jamie. And, my message is always the same. Start developing a mindful practice. It's such a simple thing. People sometimes believe that it couldn't possibly work. But when you start practicing, it's about the practice. And it's like anything. If you want to get good at something, practice. And what I always say is be mindful, pause, connect, and just keep doing it. And after a while, you won't have your heart give your mind that instruction, be mindful. It will just start happening automatically. And you will automatically be pausing. And in that pause, where the power is, you start to respond to things as they happen rather than react. Because the world is very reactionary, if that's a word. But I think you get where I'm going. So it's be mindful, pause, connect.
Yes, I like that a lot. So I'm going to put all of the links that you can give me in the descriptions, but you have a couple of websites and Facebook pages to match, and you have a book as well.
Yeah, the book's called Mindful Actions, and if they want a copy of it, or if they can't afford to buy the hard copy, just send me an email or whatever, and I'll send it out as a PDF, so that way it's free, because it's never really about the money. I've got a couple of websites, mindfulnesscoach.com.au, and they can check that out, and also the organisation, mindfullymad.org. People can go there and connect with me through there or share their story. Or if they're mindfulness mentors themselves, they can apply to get a free thing there. And, I do have other hats besides Mindfulness Master. I'm also a intuitive life coach, a psychotherapist, an act therapist, a hypnotherapist, a modern day shaman, I see myself as, and a spiritual healer. So thanks very much, Jamie. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for listening to the Three Voices podcast. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation. So if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us at our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, or through Gmail. Until next time, don't forget to take care of yourself and each other.